There was something wrong with Esperanza Ranch. Everyone in the little town of San Miguel knew it, but no one spoke openly about it. It was one of those shared secrets that hung in the air like dust on summer afternoons, always present, but rarely mentioned. The ranch sat 15 kilometers from town, at the end of a dirt road that snaked through golden fields and low hills. During the day, it looked ordinary. A main wooden house with a wide porch, a faded red barn, wooden corrals fencing the property. Nothing that drew attention. But when the sun set, Esperanza Ranch transformed into something that defied any explanation. The lights came on, all of them. At the same time, not just the lights in the main house. Every lamp, every lantern, every small bulb in every corner of the ranch illuminated at exactly 6:43 in the evening. Every day, without exception, the house glowed like a golden jewel against the darkening sky. The barn blazed. Even the small lights along the pathways lit up in perfect synchrony, and they never went out. Throughout the night, the ranch remained illuminated as if prepared to receive 1,000 guests. Sometimes, the residents of San Miguel would look toward the hills at dusk and see that persistent glow on the horizon. Some would quickly look away. Others would watch for long minutes, wondering, always wondering. The ranch had belonged to the Morales family for 3 generations. Don Carlos Morales, the patriarch, had built the property with his own hands in the 40s. He was a tough, hard-working man who had transformed that arid land into a prosperous ranch. He raised cattle, planted corn, and lived according to nature's rhythms. When he died in 1979, his son Rafael took over. Rafael was different from his father. Quieter, more introspective. He had studied electrical engineering in the capital before returning to take over the ranch, and he brought modern ideas with him. It was he who installed electricity in every corner of the property, who placed lights in places where no one had ever thought they'd be needed. Light is progress, he used to say. Light is civilization. Things began to change in October 1987. Rafael was 52 when he fell ill. No one knew exactly what it was. Some said cancer, others spoke of a rare blood disease. What everyone knew was that he didn't want to leave the ranch. He refused to go to the hospital in the capital, refused even to consider proper treatment. He stayed home, slowly wasting away, cared for by his wife, Elena, and his only daughter, Isabella. It was during those last months that the lights began their strange ritual, Elena would tell later. Years later, when she was old and memories seemed like distorted dreams, that Rafael had developed an obsession with the lights. On nights when the pain was most intense, he would drag himself through the house, turning on every lamp, every lantern. "I can't let the darkness in," he would murmur. "If the darkness gets in, I'll go with it." He died on a Tuesday, at 6:43 in the evening, exactly as the sun disappeared behind the western hills. That night, all the lights on the ranch came on by themselves. Elena was sitting beside the bed, where her husband's body was still warm, when she heard the click. Then another, and another. Like a wave spreading through the house, each switch flipped on its own. Each lamp came to life. She ran into the hallway and saw every room, every lamp, everything lit in a golden, ghostly glow. Isabella, who was 23 at the time, came running from the barn. "Mother, the barn lights, they all came on at once. I didn't touch them." They spent that night trying to turn off the lights. They flipped switches, but the lamps remained lit. They shut off the generator, the lights kept glowing. In desperation, Elena even physically disconnected some wires, but that only made the lights flicker briefly before returning. As if fed by some invisible source, exhausted and frightened, mother and daughter finally gave up at 3 in the morning. They sat on the porch, wrapped in blankets, watching the ranch glow like a solitary beacon in the prairie darkness. When the sun rose, the lights finally went out, but the next night at 6:43 exactly, they came on again, and the next night and the next. Elena called an electrician from San Miguel. The man, Don Jesus, was over 60 and knew electrical systems better than anyone in the region. He spent 2 days examining every wire, every connection, every switch on the ranch. He checked the generator, inspected the breaker panel, tested the voltages. "It doesn't make sense," he finally said, scratching his grey head. "The switches are in the off position, but electricity flows anyway. It's as if there's a parallel circuit I can't find. But I've checked everything. There's no hidden circuit. What do I do?" Elena asked. Don Jesus looked at her with an expression that mixed pity and unease. "Pray, Senora, pray." She called a priest. Father Miguel came with holy water and prayers, blessing every room, every corner of the ranch. The lights continued their relentless cycle. Elena considered hiring a specialist from the capital, but Isabella dissuaded her. "Mother," she said, "if we tell strangers about this, they'll think we're crazy, or they'll turn this place into a circus." So they learned to live with it. Months became years. Elena and Isabella ran the ranch as best they could, raising the cattle, maintaining the property, living under the constant nocturnal glow that never failed, never wavered, never offered any explanation. The people of San Miguel began to talk. Some said it was Raphael's spirit, trapped between worlds, refusing to accept the darkness he had so feared. Others suggested there was something in the land, some ancient energy the ranch had awakened. The most skeptical insisted there had to be a rational explanation. Perhaps a faulty electrical system that somehow created a feedback loop, but no one could explain why the lights came on at exactly 6:43, the exact minute of Raphael's death. In 1995, Elena fell ill. At 71, her heart was weak. Isabella, now 31 and still unmarried, cared for her and the ranch. One night, sitting on the porch while the ranch lights glowed faithfully behind them, Elena grabbed her daughter's hand. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice weak. "About the night your father died." Isabella waited. That afternoon, just before he passed, his eyes opened one last time. He looked at me with such clarity. There was no more pain in them. He said, "Elena, promise me something. Promise you'll never let this place go dark. As long as there's light, there's life. As long as there's light, you'll be safe," I promised. And then he was gone. Tears ran down Elena's wrinkled face. At first, I thought the lights were his spirit keeping the promise I made, protecting us. But now I don't know anymore. Sometimes at night I look at all those lights and wonder if they're a blessing or a curse. Elena died 3 weeks later. On a spring afternoon, Isabella buried her next to Raphael in the small family cemetery on the east hill of the property. That night, at 6:43, the lights came on as always, but something was different. Isabella noticed it first in the main house. The lights seemed brighter, not much, just enough to be noticeable. And there was something else, a quality to the light, a feeling she couldn't name. As if the lamps weren't just producing light, but vigilance. She tried not to think about it, tried to continue her routine. But on lonely nights, when the wind howled across the prairie and the ranch glowed against the darkness, Isabella felt she wasn't alone. Not in a frightening way, not exactly. It was more as if the house itself was alive, breathing, watching. In 1998, a reporter from a capital city newspaper showed up at the ranch. His name was Javier Mendoza, a young man in his early 20s with curious eyes and a notebook always at hand. He had heard stories about Esperanza Ranch through a friend who had family in San Miguel. "Can I write a story about this?" he asked Isabella. "People should know. This is extraordinary." Isabella hesitated, but there was something in Javier's sincerity that convinced her. "You can stay for a week," she said. "See for yourself." Javier set himself up in the guest room and spent his days investigating. He brought equipment, energy meters, cameras, recorders. He documented everything meticulously. He interviewed Isabella, talked to townspeople, examined the ranch's electrical systems. On the 5th night, at 6:43, he was in the main house with his cameras positioned to capture the moment the lights would come on. They came on, as always. But when Javier checked his footage afterward, he found something disturbing. The cameras had recorded the moment, but in the images, the lights didn't just turn on. They pulsed. Once, twice, 3 times, in a pattern that seemed almost deliberate, like a code. "Did you see this?" he asked Isabella, showing her the video. She watched, her face paling. No, with my eyes, they just turn on. It's always been that way. Javier spent the 6th night in the barn, where the lights were older and more numerous. He set up his camera to record continuously. At 3 in the morning, he heard a sound, soft footsteps on the roof. He went out to investigate, but there was nothing outside. Just the silent fields bathed in the ranch's tireless glow. When he came back inside, his camera had been moved. Not knocked over, not damaged, just carefully repositioned to point at the barn door. And in the footage, he could see himself sleeping in his chair for a full hour. But he hadn't slept. He was certain he hadn't slept. The next morning, Javier packed his bags. "I'll write the story," he told Isabella, "but I think there are things here that shouldn't be disturbed. Things a newspaper article can't explain." The article was never published. Javier told his editor the story had no substance, that it was just a case of faulty electrical wiring. But he sent Isabella all his footage and notes. "In case you need them someday," he said. "In case you need proof you're not crazy." The years passed. Isabella grew old alone at Esperanza Ranch, accompanied only by the cattle, the horses, and the lights that never failed. She never married, never had children. When townspeople asked why she didn't sell the property and move somewhere normal, she just smiled sadly. "This is my home," she would say. "And I think I have a responsibility." Responsibility to what? She never answered. In 2019, when Isabella was 55, something new happened. It was a winter night, cold and clear. She was in the kitchen making tea when all the ranch lights began to pulse. Not like in Javier's video, this was different, stronger, more insistent, like a heartbeat. Isabella stepped out onto the porch. Lights across the entire property pulsed in unison. The barn, the stables, the house, the pathways. Each lamp breathing light into the night, and then, for just a moment, they all went out completely, total darkness. The first true darkness that Esperanza Ranch had known in 32 years. Isabella stood frozen, her heart pounding, enveloped in a darkness so complete it seemed solid. The silence was deafening. Then, one by one, the lights came back, but not all at once. They lit in sequence, starting from the house and moving outward like a wave, like a path being illuminated. The path led to the family cemetery on the East Hill. Isabella understood. She grabbed a flashlight, though she didn't need it with all the ranch lights on, and walked to the cemetery. The night was quiet, except for the rustle of wind in the dry grass. When she reached her parents' graves, she stopped. There, where there had been no light before, where she had never installed any lamp, was a soft glow. It didn't come from any physical source. It seemed to emanate from the soil itself. Concentrated directly above the graves, Isabella knelt. "Father," she whispered, "I don't know what you're trying to tell me. I don't know if you're trying to protect me, or if you're trapped, or if this is something completely different. But you don't need to do this anymore. I'll be fine. Mother is with you now. You both can rest." The light above the graves glowed brighter for a moment, then faded. Isabella returned to the house. When she entered, all the lights were on, as always. But something had changed. She could feel it. The quality of vigilance was gone. Now the lights were just lights that night. For the first time since Raphael's death, Isabella slept deeply. The next morning, at 6:43, exactly 32 years after Raphael's death, the lights of Esperanza Ranch went out. And this time, they didn't come back on. Isabella stood on the porch that afternoon, watching the clock. 6:42, 6:43, 6:44. Darkness, just natural darkness, and stars beginning to appear in the twilight sky. She flipped switches manually, and the lights turned on and off normally, as they should, like ordinary lights. There was nothing extraordinary about them anymore. The people of San Miguel noticed. Some drove to the ranch that night, expecting to see the familiar glow on the horizon. Instead, they saw only darkness silhouetted against the night sky. Word spread quickly. The lights went out. After all these years, they finally went out. Did she die too? But Isabella was alive. More alive than she'd felt in years. Don Jesus, the electrician, now in his 90s and long retired, paid a visit. Is it true then? They stopped? They stopped. Isabella confirmed. He shook his head, amazed. 50 years working with electricity, and that was the only thing I could never explain. I guess some things have no explanation. Isabella made him a cup of coffee in the kitchen. Don Jesus, can I ask you a question? That first time you came in 1987, when you examined all the systems, did you really find nothing? No anomaly? The old man hesitated. I found one thing, but it was so strange I thought my instruments were malfunctioning. In every lamp, every connection, there was a resistance, as if something was pulling the electricity somewhere my meters couldn't detect, as if the energy was going to 2 dimensions at once. Why didn't you ever tell me? Because it would sound like madness, and because... He looked out the window at the silent fields, because sometimes, when I was working up there in the attic, I swore I heard a voice. Just one word, repeated over and over. Quédate. Stay. Isabella served the coffee with slightly trembling hands. In the following months, life at Esperanza Ranch normalized. Isabella controlled the lights manually, turning them on when it got dark and turning them off before bed. The nocturnal silence, once disturbing by its absence, became comforting, but she maintained a routine. Every night at 6:43, wherever she was, whatever she was doing, she stopped. She stood quiet for a minute. She remembered, and always, she left one light on, the small lamp on the porch, the same one where her father used to sit on summer afternoons, stayed on all night. Not out of necessity, not out of fear of darkness, out of respect. Out of memory, out of love. Years later, when Isabella was an elderly woman with grey hair and hands stained by work, she received an unexpected visit. A young woman arrived at the ranch, introducing herself as Lucia Mendoza. My uncle was Javier Mendoza, she explained, the reporter who visited in 1998. He died last year, and while going through his belongings, I found all the files about this place. All the footage, all the notes, and an unsent letter addressed to you. Isabella brought the young woman inside. The letter was yellowed but preserved, written in Javier's handwriting. Dear Isabella, it read, I write this 20 years after my visit to your ranch. I never published the story, as you know, but I never stopped thinking about what I witnessed. I studied physics, paranormal phenomena, electrical engineering, anything that might offer an explanation. I never found one, but I came to a conclusion. Some things in this world are not meant to be explained. They are meant to be honored. Your father created something beyond understanding, whether through love, through fear, or through pure force of will. He bent the rules of reality to keep a promise. That's not frightening, it's extraordinary. It's proof that love persists in ways science can never measure. Thank you for allowing me to witness it, Javier. Isabella carefully folded the letter and looked at Lucia. Your uncle was a wise man, and kind not to expose this to the world. Do the lights really never turn on by themselves anymore? Lucia asked. No, Isabella said. There's nothing supernatural here anymore. It's just a ranch, just a house. But as she said this, she looked at the small porch lamp that glowed faithfully through the window and smiled. That night, after Lucia left, Isabella sat on the porch as she always did. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and purple. At 6:43, she closed her eyes and whispered as she always did, Thank you, Papa. Thank you. When she opened her eyes for just a second, so brief she later wondered if she'd imagined it, the porch lamp blinked twice. Twice. Like an answer, like a final goodbye, or perhaps just perhaps. Like a promise that even after she was gone, even after the ranch passed to other hands, there would always be a small light in the darkness, reminding anyone who cared to see that love is the most powerful force in the universe, stronger than death, stronger than time, stronger even than darkness. And in the little town of San Miguel, when people look toward the hills at dusk, they can still see a small light shining where Esperanza Ranch rests. Just one light now, modest, constant, a beacon, a memorial, a mystery both solved and unsolved, and no one knows why. But perhaps in the end, they don't need to know.